Bullshit. That's the first word that always comes to mind when I see my son-in-law Mark's gleaming white Lexus pull into my driveway. Not the car itself, it's a fine piece of machinery, I suppose, but the man driving it. He's a walking, talking billboard for insincerity, wrapped in a polo shirt and smelling faintly of expensive aftershave and desperation. There he was, last Tuesday, climbing the steps to my porch here in Atlanta, the air thick and sweet with the smell of my neighbor's gardenias. I was sitting in my favorite wicker chair, a cup of proper Earl Grey, Twinings, of course, steaming beside me. My arthritis was acting up in my right hand, but I held that porcelain cup steady. You never let them see a tremor. "Helen, looking radiant as ever," he boomed, flashing a smile so white it could guide ships to shore. He was juggling 2 Trader Joe's bags, the paper kind that always seem virtuous until they tear at the bottom. "Mark," I said, my voice as level as a ledger sheet. I took a slow sip of my tea. "You know you don't have to bring me things." "Nonsense, just a few essentials. Gotcha that organic kale you love and some almond milk for your coffee." I don't love kale. It tastes like disappointment. And I take my coffee black, same as my late husband Robert did for 45 years. But you don't correct a snake oil salesman when he's in the middle of his pitch. You just let him talk. He set the bags down with a self-satisfied thud and gestured around my porch. "Everything secure? The system working okay?" Ah, the system. His pride and joy. 2 months ago, Mark had installed this technological monstrosity he called a smart home security suite. Cameras that look like little black eyeballs, a doorbell that interviews the mailman, and a central tablet he'd mounted on the wall in my hallway. He'd insisted it was from my safety. Said a woman on her own on a fixed income was a target. Honey, the only target I felt like was his. "It's working," I said, my voice clipped. "In fact, it's working a little too well." I reached over and tapped my own tablet, an iPad I use for my crosswords and keeping up with the grandkids on Facebook. I pulled up the notification screen. It was a long, infuriating list of identical alerts, each with a little map icon. Mark's iPhone has entered the geofence. Mark's iPhone has left the geofence. Mark's iPhone has entered the geofence. "This," I said, turning the screen so he could see it. "This geofencing thing, it pings me every single time your car turns onto my street, and again when you leave. It pings me when my daughter, your wife, comes to visit. It even pinged me 6 times yesterday when the Amazon driver got lost. It's driving me insane, Mark. It's like having a damn ankle monitor I never asked for." He had the audacity to chuckle, a condescending little puff of air. "Oh, Helen," he said, patting my hand like I was a senile poodle. "That's the best part. It means we always know who's coming and going. It's for your protection. It's for the best." It's for the best. That phrase, it's the verbal pat on the head people give you when they think your brain has turned to mush along with your cartilage. I spent 40 years as a senior accountant for a major firm downtown. I can calculate amortization schedules in my head, sweetie. I know what a balance sheet is supposed to look like, and his reasoning wasn't adding up. He leaned in, his voice dropping to that conspiratory tone he thinks he's being clever. "Speaking of making things better," he began, pivoting so smoothly it was almost impressive. "I was looking over some things with Sarah, and we were thinking, your finances seem a bit complicated." My teacup stopped halfway to my lips. Complicated? My finances were a fortress, a simple, elegant, ironclad fortress of Social Security, Robert's pension, and 2 carefully managed investment accounts I had set up myself back in '98. I still balanced my checkbook by hand every single month. "We think it's time we simplified things for you, Helen," he continued, his eyes gleaming. Consolidate everything. Make it easier for you to manage. Less paperwork, less stress. I just stared at him. The scent of bergamot from my tea suddenly sharp and bitter in my nostrils. He wanted to simplify my money. This young buck, who probably uses Zelle to pay his bar tabs, wanted to get his hands on a system I had built and perfected over a lifetime. It wasn't about my safety, was it? None of it was. The cameras, the doorbell, that damn geofencing tracking every visitor, it was all a prelude. I looked from the incessant pings on my tablet to the greedy, helpful smile plastered on his face. Why was he so obsessed with tracking who came to my door? And why the hell was he suddenly so desperate to get his hands on my money?
Hell, who could sleep after a conversation like that? I swear, I laid in bed for hours, just staring at the ceiling, the shadows from the pecan tree outside dancing like spiders on the plaster. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face. That earnest, helpful, utterly phony smile. Simplify, consolidate. The words echoed in my head, tasting like poison. They weren't words of care, they were words of conquest. The grandfather clock in the hall felt like a metronome counting down to something awful. My hip was acting up, a dull ache that always gets worse when I'm stressed. Finally, around 2 a.m, I gave up. Screw it. I wasn't getting any sleep anyway. I swung my legs out of bed, slipped on my robe, and padded out to the living room, my bare feet cold on the hardwood floors Robert and I had put in ourselves back in '83. I picked up that damn tablet he'd left on the end table. It was glowing faintly, still pinging with useless notifications from this wonderful high-tech peace of mind he'd installed. I was about to turn it off, but a nasty little thought, a bitter little worm of pure spite, wiggled through my mind. Fine, I thought. You want to watch my house so bad? Let's see what your little spy machine has been watching. I opened the security app. It was all there in a neat little list they call an event log. Motion detected, front porch, 3:17 p.m. That was probably the mailman. Doorbell rung. 4:02 p.m. That was Mark, right on time. Motion detected, living room, 4:05 p.m. On and on it went, a tedious diary of a boring Tuesday. I kept scrolling down, fueled by Earl Grey and indignation, not even sure what I was looking for. And then I saw it. It was nestled between 2 motion-detected alerts, an entry so mundane I almost missed it. The timestamp was 2:15 p.m., which was wrong, of course, because he hadn't even arrived until 4. But my eyes snagged on the device name. Mark's iPhone connected to guest Wi-Fi. Duration, 47 minutes. I stared at the screen. My blood went cold. Wait a minute. That couldn't be right. I reread the timestamp. 2:15 p.m.? No, that was before he got here. Wait. No. Lord, my brain was foggy. I was mixing up the days. I scrolled back up. Doorbell rung. 4:02 p.m. Okay, so he was here. The 2:15 p.m. must have been from his last visit. I kept scrolling, my finger tracing the glass. And there it was again, a second entry. Mark's iPhone connected to guest Wi-Fi. Duration, 58 minutes. My breath hitched. He was sitting right across from me at 4:11 p.m. on my floral sofa, nursing a glass of iced tea I'd made for him, telling me my finances were, quote, complicated. His iPhone was on the polished mahogany of the coffee table between us, screen down the entire time. He never once picked it up. He wasn't scrolling through emails or tapping out texts. He was looking right in my eye, sweetie, selling me his snake oil pitch. So how in the hell was his phone actively using my Wi-Fi for almost a solid hour while pretending to be my loving, concerned son-in-law? A memory surfaced, sharp and unwelcome. When he installed all this nonsense, he insisted on setting up 2 networks, one for me and a guest Wi-Fi. It's more secure this way, Helen, he had said, his fingers flying across the tablet. for when your friends or the grandkids visit, keeps them off your main network, protects your devices. I thought it was overkill, just more tech babble from a whippersnapper who thinks a password with a $sign in it is the height of security. Now, that separate network felt like a secret backdoor he'd built into my home. That was it, the last straw. I put the tablet down, the click of it on the wood echoing in the silent house. I walked over to my little cherry wood secretary desk in the corner, the one place in the house that was still truly mine. I sat down, the familiar creak of the chair a small comfort, and woke up my old, reliable Dell desktop. The fan whirred to life with a gentle hum. I didn't bother with Google. I typed wellsfargo.com directly into the address bar, just like I always do. My fingers knew the login and password by heart. The page loaded. Checkings, savings, a small CD. The balances looked right. I clicked into the activity log. Line by line, my old accountant brain took over. Debits, credits, rolling balances, Social Security deposit, check cashed for the plumber, transfer to my savings. It was all there. Perfect. Too perfect. Next, I opened a new tab, Charles Schwab. This was the big one. This was Robert's pension and the investments I'd nurtured for 25 years. I logged in, my heart thumping a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I ran the reports, portfolio value, recent trades, dividend reinvestments. Again, every single penny was accounted for. Nothing was missing. Nothing was out of place. I leaned back, the leather of the chair cool against my skin. For a second, I almost felt foolish. Maybe it was just a glitch in the app. Maybe his phone connected automatically and he didn't even realize it. But I knew better. In accounting, you learn that when you have a discrepancy, a number that doesn't add up, a log entry that makes no sense, you don't ignore it. It's a thread, and you pull it. The numbers on my screen were all correct, but that Wi-Fi log was a ghost in the machine. It was a fact that didn't fit the story I was being told. He wasn't working, he wasn't on his laptop, he was sitting right there, trying to charm his way into my life savings. So what exactly could he have been doing, silently, invisibly, on my network for a full hour, while pretending to be my loving, concerned son-in-law?
Lord, the condescension. It's a special kind of poison, isn't it? The kind that smiles at you while it works its way into your veins. The next morning, I put on my navy blue blazer, the one I always wore to board meetings back when I volunteered for the church finance committee. Power armor. My arthritis was acting up, a dull ache in my knuckles, but I gripped my purse like a weapon and marched into the downtown branch of Wells Fargo. The air smelled of industrial carpet cleaner and faint, desperate money. I didn't want some teller fresh out of college. I had an appointment with the branch manager, a Mr. Davies. He came out to greet me, all shiny shoes and a tie that looked like a television test pattern. He couldn't have been more than 35, a real whippersnapper. "Mrs. Parker, so good to see you," he said, his voice dripping with a practiced syrupy concern that set my teeth on edge. He led me into his glass-walled office, the chair he offered me squeaking in protest. I sat down, placed my purse squarely on my lap, and looked him right in his watery blue eyes. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I didn't ask about his weekend. "Mr. Davies," I said, my voice as level and cool as a marble countertop. "I need to request a full, detailed forensic audit on all of my accounts held at this bank, checking, savings, and the CD. I want a paper trail for every single transaction, debit, credit, and transfer for the past 18 months. He blinked. His professional smile faltered for just a second. "An audit, Mrs. Parker? Is there a problem? A transaction you don't recognize?" And there it was, the look. Not confusion, not professional curiosity. It was pity. Pure, unadulterated, pat you on the head pity. He was looking at me like I'd forgotten where I'd parked my car. "I didn't say I didn't recognize a transaction," I said, keeping my voice even. "I said I want an audit." He leaned forward, folding his hands on his desk.
It was meant to be a comforting gesture, I suppose. To me, it looked like he was getting ready to handle a toddler. Of course. It's just, well, it's a significant undertaking and expensive. You know your son-in-law, Mark, was in here just last week. Bingo. My heart didn't even speed up. It turned to a block of ice in my chest. Oh, was he? I asked, feigning mild surprise. Yes, Mr. Davies continued, a little too eagerly. A fine young man, very concerned about you. He mentioned you've been having some trouble, keeping track of things lately. A little overwhelmed with the paperwork since Robert passed. He just wanted to make sure everything was in order, to help you manage things. The son of a bitch. He had already been here. He'd already laid the groundwork, painting me as a dotty old woman, a sweet, confused thing who couldn't balance her own checkbook anymore. The same checkbook I'd used to manage a 7-figure payroll for a manufacturing firm for 20 years. The fury that washed over me was so cold and so sharp, it was almost clarifying. Mr. Davies, I said, leaning forward just an inch, I appreciate my son-in-law's, concern, but I have been managing my own finances since before you were born, and I assure you, I am not overwhelmed. I am being prudent. I'm getting my ducks in a row. It's just good housekeeping. I had to give him a reason, a story he could swallow. I'm updating my will, and my lawyer wants a complete financial snapshot. Every single line item accounted for. Every automatic payment, every Social Security deposit, every Zelle transfer, even that teeny little $10 a month premium for an old accidental death policy Robert took out years ago. I want the source documentation for everything. I threw that last part in to make it sound like I was being obsessively thorough, a fussy old accountant, just another boring detail in a mountain of paperwork. He still hesitated, looking at me like I was a fragile piece of china. Helen, may I call you Helen? We can just run a standard statement for you. A full audit really isn't necessary for estate planning. That's when the ice in my veins began to boil. I smiled, but it was all teeth. No, Mr. Davies, you may not call me Helen. You may call me Mrs. Parker, and you will initiate the audit I have requested. Or, if you prefer, I can close my accounts today, all 7 figures of them, and take my business to the bank across the street. I am quite certain their manager will be more than happy to accommodate a client who is simply trying to be responsible with her life's savings. Do I make myself clear? The color drained from his face. The pity was gone, replaced with a flicker of fear. He saw the retired accountant then, not the confused old woman. He started typing furiously on his keyboard. Yes, Mrs. Parker. Yes, Mrs. Parker. I'll get the paperwork started immediately. I stood up, my knees creaking in protest, but I felt 10 feet tall. I walked out of that bank with my head held high, the click of my heels on the marble floor echoing behind me. But once I was back in my Buick, I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles were white. He had been one step ahead of me, poisoning the well, defining the narrative. It wasn't just about my money anymore. It was a race. Could I get the proof I needed before Mark convinced everyone, including my own daughter, that I had lost my damn mind?
Lord, the drive home was a blur. The adrenaline from my little standoff at the bank had curdled into a cold, hard knot in my stomach. I parked the Buick in the garage, the engine ticking as it cooled, and sat there for a full 5 minutes, just breathing. The familiar scent of motor oil in my late husband Robert's old woodworking projects was a comfort. This was my fortress, my home, and that little weasel was trying to breach the walls. Inside, the grandfather clock in the hall chimed 3, its deep, familiar tones a balm to my frayed nerves. I went straight to the kitchen, put the kettle on for my Earl Grey, and moved with purpose. No more waiting, no more reacting. It was time to set my own traps. My desk, Robert's old mahogany partner desk, sits in the sunroom overlooking my prize-winning azaleas. It's my command center. For 40 years, I balanced ledgers there,
untangled corporate accounts, and found the pennies that multi-million-dollar companies had misplaced. My arthritis makes it harder to write these days, but the mind is as sharp as a tax auditor's pencil. I opened the top left drawer. Beneath a stack of old checkbook registers and a tin of paper clips, I found it. A beautiful, weighty, sterling silver fountain pen. Robert had given it to me for my retirement. It was one of those fancy German ones, looked like $1 million, but its real value wasn't in the silver. I twisted the cap, not to expose the nib, but to activate the microphone. A tiny blue light, smaller than a pinprick, blinked twice and then went dark. High fidelity, 48-hour battery life. A little gift I'd bought myself a few years back when my neighbor swore her gardener was shortchanging her on mulch. Turns out he was, the cheat. I set the pen in its marble holder on the corner of the leather desk blotter, aimed perfectly at the wing-back chair where guests always sat. Then I sat and waited, sipping my tea. I didn't have to wait long. The doorbell rang at precisely 4:15. Punctual, I'll give him that. I took a deep, steadying breath, shuffled to the door, and put on my best, pleasantly confused face. There he was, Mark, dressed in a golf shirt that cost more than my weekly groceries, smelling faintly of some expensive, cloying cologne. He was holding a pink box from my favorite bakery. See? The perfect, caring son-in-law, a snake oil salesman in Brooks Brothers clothing. "Helen," he said, his voice oozing a syrupy concern that made my teeth ache. "I was so worried after you called. I brought you some cannolis, your favorite." "Oh, Mark, that's thoughtful," I mumbled, letting him in. "I'm just a little tired today." He followed me into the sunroom, placing the box on the coffee table. He didn't sit right away. He paced, running a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. Theatrics. "I know you are," he said, his voice dropping into that gentle, patronizing tone he'd perfected. "That's what I'm here. After what happened at the bank, Helen, I'm worried you're taking on too much. The stress isn't good for you." I sank into my desk chair, feeling the familiar support against my back. "The manager was a very rude young man," I said, letting a slight tremor enter my voice. I know, he soothed, "but that's what I'm talking about. You shouldn't have to deal with people like that. You should be enjoying your retirement, gardening, your book club." He paused, then moved in for the kill. He picked up a framed photo from the corner of my desk. It was of my daughter, Sarah, his late wife, my beautiful, brilliant girl taken from us by cancer far too soon. He held the photo like it was a holy relic. "Sarah, she made me promise I would always look out for you, Helen. She worried. She knew how much you did for everyone else, and she just wanted you to be safe, to be cared for." A hot spike of pure, unadulterated rage shot through me, using my own daughter's memory against me. The sheer, calculated cruelty of it nearly took my breath away. But on my face, I let my features crumple. I let a tear slip down my cheek. "I miss her so much," I whispered. He saw his opening. "We all do," he said, his voice thick with false emotion. He put the photo down and pulled a thick manila envelope from his briefcase. "That's why I had my lawyer draw these up." He laid the documents on my blotter, right next to the silver pen. "Power of attorney," the top page read in stark black letters. "It's nothing scary, I promise," he said quickly, seeing the look on my face. It just lets me help. It lets me talk to the rude bank managers for you. It lets me handle the bills, the investments, all the stressful stuff so you don't have to. It's what Sarah would have wanted, Helen, for you to be protected." I stared at the papers, my eyes intentionally unfocused. I feigned a deep, weary sigh. I poked at the top page. "Oh dear,
This all looks so complicated. What about the paperwork for the Atlanta Port Authority municipal bonds? The Series G ones. The rollover is next month, and the forms are very specific. Robert always handled that. I let my voice trail off, planting a little seed of boring administrative nonsense. Mark waved a dismissive hand, the picture of magnanimity. Helen, sweetie, don't you worry your pretty little head about any of that. That's exactly the kind of thing I'll take care of. You won't have to think about municipal bonds ever again. I'm sure I won't, I thought. I looked up at him, my eyes wide and watery. I let my shoulders slump in defeat. I looked from his earnest, predatory face to the thick stack of papers that would sign away my entire life. Yes, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Yes, you're right, Mark. I'm just so tired. Let me just look them over. A triumphant gleam flashed in his eyes, gone as quickly as it appeared. He thought he had me. The confused old widow, beaten down by grief and paperwork, ready to hand over the king to the kingdom. He settled into the wingback chair, right in the microphone's line of fire, a smug little smile playing on his lips. He thought the game was over. But I could see that tiny, pinprick-sized microphone from the corner of my eye. The real game was just beginning. And now that he thought I was no longer a threat, I just had to wait and see what truth this monster would speak into the silence.
Lord, give me strength. The screen door slammed shut behind him with a satisfying thwack, the old spring groaning in protest. I didn't move from my wicker rocking chair, hidden in the afternoon shadows of the porch. I just sat there, my half-finished Earl Grey sweating onto the doily on the side table, and watched him leave. He didn't just walk to his car, he swaggered. You know the type. The chest puffed out, the shoulders rolling back like some young buck who just won a prize at the county fair. He walked down my cracked flagstone path, the one Robert and I laid ourselves back in '88, with the air of a man who already owned the place. His fancy Italian shoes, the kind with no laces, crunched on the gravel I needed to have replaced. Another thing for the list. He got to that shiny silver Lexus of his, the one that still smelled of new money and arrogance, and he opened the door. But he didn't just get in and drive away. Oh no, honey, the show wasn't over. He slid into the driver's seat, left the door ajar, and pulled out his iPhone. He parked just far enough down the street that he must have thought he was out of sight, but my eyesight is still sharp, and from the angle of my rocker, I had a perfect, unobstructed view. He thought the game was over. He thought the little old lady was inside, weeping into a floral handkerchief, overwhelmed with grief and Series G municipal bonds. The fool. My arthritis was acting up, a dull throb in my knuckles gripping the armrest. But I felt a strange, cold calm settle over me, the kind of calm you get right before the tornado hits. I watched him tap the screen and put the phone to his ear. And then I saw it. His whole demeanor changed. He threw his head back and laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound, even from 100 feet away. It was a sharp, barking laugh of pure, unadulterated triumph. He was gesturing with his free hand, chopping the air. His face lit up with a kind of cruel glee. He was reenacting it. I knew it in my bones. He was telling someone, bragging to someone, about his performance, about the watery eyes, the slumped shoulders, the whispered yes from the doddering old widow. The fool. My arthritis was acting up, a dull throb in my knuckles gripping armrest, but I felt a strange, cold calm settle over me, the kind of calm you get right before the tornado hits. I watched him tap the screen and put the phone to his ear. And then I saw it. His whole demeanor changed. He threw his head back and laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound, even from 100 feet away. It was a sharp, barking laugh of pure, unadulterated triumph. He was gesturing with his free hand, chopping the air. His face lit up with a kind of cruel glee. He was reenacting it. I knew it in my bones. He was telling someone, bragging to someone about his performance, about the watery eyes, the slumped shoulders, the whispered yes from the doddering old widow, the fool. My arthritis was acting up, a dull throb in my knuckles gripping the armrest, but I felt a strange, cold calm settle over me, the kind of calm you get right before the tornado hits. I watched him tap the screen and put the phone to his ear. Finally, he hung up, a Cheshire cat grin plastered on his face. He started the Lexus. It made a quiet, expensive purr, not like Robert's old reliable Ford, and pulled away from the curb, disappearing down the street. The sudden silence on the porch was deafening, broken only by the chirping of a lone cricket. But his laughter still echoed in my ears. It made me wonder, with a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air, who was on the other end of that call? And what, in God's name, was so damn funny?
Lord, the silence after he left was a physical thing. It pressed in on my eardrums heavier than the humid Atlanta air. I went back inside, the screen door sighing shut behind me, and walked straight to the kitchen. My hands were shaken, just a little bit. Not from fear, you understand. Oh no, honey, that ship had sailed. It was rage, a cold, clean, 72-year-old rage that settled deep in my bones. I put the kettle on for a cup of Earl Grey, the familiar ritual, a small anchor in the storm that was brewing inside me. For 3 days, I waited. 3 days of checking my email, of staring at my old MacBook until the screen blurred, of balancing my checkbook down to the penny just to keep my hands and mind occupied. Every creak of the floorboards was him coming back. Every car that drove by was that damn Lexus. I felt like a coiled spring. Then on Thursday afternoon, just as the sun was slanting through the blinds and painting stripes across Robert's old roll-top desk, it happened. A quiet little ping from the computer. It was an email from a Mr. Henderson in the Wells Fargo Corporate Security and Fraud Investigations Department. The subject line was just a case number. My heart didn't leap. It didn't pound. It just settled into a slow, steady, determined beat. Thump, 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 thump. The rhythm of the hunt. Getting into that file was like trying to break into Fort Knox, and I appreciated every second of it. 2-factor authentication, a special code sent to my phone, a password I'd have to be a cryptographer to remember. Good, let them make it difficult. It meant they were serious. When the file finally opened, it wasn't some flashy presentation, it was a spreadsheet. An ocean of numbers and dates and transaction codes. To a normal person, it would look like gibberish, just the chaotic ebb and flow of a retirement account in a volatile market. A few dollars up here, a few dollars down there. Market corrections, they call them. Bullshit is what I call them. But I'm not a normal person. I'm the woman who once found a 1.17 cent discrepancy in the petty cash ledger for a multinational corporation and traced it back to a faulty vending machine in a sub-basement in Delaware. My eyes scanned the columns, my brain, even after all these years, sifting and sorting. And then I saw it. It wasn't one big withdrawal. A young buck like Mark isn't that stupid. He's greedy, but he's not a complete moron. No, this was death by 1,000 cuts. A series of tiny transfers, never more than $50, sometimes as little as 9 or 10. They were spaced out, seemingly at random, but they weren't random. There was a pattern, a sick little algorithmic signature. The amounts were always tied to the day's date in some way. Added, subtracted, multiplied. A little digital tick he couldn't control. And here's the part that would be boring to anyone but another accountant. They were all initiated from an IP address that geolocated to a coffee shop 2 blocks from his office, and they all occurred on the 3rd trading day of the week. It was his towel, his little flourish,
the signature of an arrogant artist who thought no one was smart enough to appreciate his work. And where did all this money go? Mr. Henderson's report was very clear on that. Each tiny transaction, hundreds of them, over 18 months, was funneled into something called a decentralized crypto wallet, digital monopoly money, an untraceable electronic black hole designed for people with things to hide. I leaned back in Robert's old leather chair, the worn material groaning in protest. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt a profound, chilling sense of vindication, the kind that freezes your blood but sharpens your mind. He wasn't just taking my money, he was systematically draining the lifeblood of the future Robert and I had built, drop by painstaking drop. He had turned my life's work into his personal slush fund. That was it. The waiting was over. The time for observation was done. I picked up my iPhone, my knuckles white, the arthritis in my thumb joint screaming at me. I ignored it. I dialed my daughter Sarah. She answered on the second ring, her voice full of that bubbly energy that I usually loved but couldn't stomach right now. "Hi, Mom. What's up?" "Sarah," I said, my voice as flat and hard as a granite countertop, "I'm calling a family meeting. This Sunday, 2 o'clock, my house. Be here." There was a pause. "A family meeting? Is everything okay? You sound—" I cut her off. "Everything is about to be. Mark needs to be here. Don't take no for an answer. This is not a request." I hung up before she could argue. My next call was to my niece Amelia, my brother's girl. She didn't become a partner at her law firm in Buckhead by being a shrinking violet. "Aunt Helen, what a surprise!" "Amelia, sweetie, I need a favor," I said, all business. "Cancel your brunch plans for Sunday. I need you at my house at 2 p.m., and I need you to bring your laptop and that scary lawyer face you make in court." She didn't even hesitate. "I'll be there at 1:30. What's going on?" I took a slow, deep breath, looking at the glowing spreadsheet on my screen, a beautiful, damning tapestry of theft. "Honey," I said, "we're about to have an intervention." The pieces were on the board. The trap was set. Now all the players had to do was walk into the room. I just sat there in the silence, a cup of now cold tea on the desk, and wondered, when my own daughter, my sweet, trusting Sarah, sees this proof in black and white, whose side is she gonna take?
Lord, the silence in that living room was so thick you could have buttered a biscuit with it. Sunday afternoon sun was streaming through the bay window, lighting up the dust motes dancing in the air, but inside, it felt like a tomb. My grandfather clock in the hall, usually a comforting presence, just went tick-tock, tick-tock, like a damn time bomb. Sarah and Mark sat on the floral sofa, the one Robert and I bought back in '88. My Sarah looked like a nervous little bird, twisting the strap of her purse in her lap. And Mark was playing the role of his life. He had his arm around her, patting her shoulder with this look of deep, soulful concern on his face. He looked like one of those fellas on the TV asking for donations to save the puppies, a complete and utter snake oil salesman. My niece, Amelia, was a rock. She sat in the wingback chair to my left, her posture perfect, her laptop open but dark on the ottoman in front of her. She had her scary lawyer face on, just as I'd requested, impassive, watchful. She didn't look at them. She looked at me, a silent question in her eyes. I poured myself a fresh cup of Earl Grey from the silver service on the coffee table. The clink of the porcelain was the only sound for a full minute. I let them stew in it. Finally, Mark cleared his throat. "Helen," he began, his voice dripping with that syrupy fake sympathy that always set my teeth on edge, "we're here because we love you. Sarah and I, we're worried." I just raised an eyebrow and took a sip of my tea. Let him talk.
Give a fool enough rope and he'll build his own gallows. Things have been slipping, he continued, glancing at Sarah for support. She just nodded weakly, her eyes welling up. Oh, he was good. He was really good. The missed bill payments last month, forgetting to pick up your prescription, and Helen, that Safe Haven digital vault subscription I set up for you to keep all your photos and documents safe. You called me 3 times last week asking what that charge on your Wells Fargo statement was. We went over it each time. He had the gall to make it sound like he was the patient one. That ridiculous, overpriced service he insisted I needed. It was just one of a dozen little threads I'd been pulling on. It's a lot to manage, he said, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. Online banking, Zelle, all this new technology. It's confusing for anyone, let alone someone on a fixed income who's used to doing things with a checkbook. He made it sound like I was a fossil who'd been just thawed out. I, who had balanced the books for a multi-million-dollar company for 30 years, using programs that would make his little iPhone apps curl up and die. Then came the masterstroke. He reached into his leather briefcase, the one I bought him for Christmas 2 years ago, and pulled out a sheaf of papers. He laid them on the mahogany coffee table between us. He laid them on the mahogany coffee table between us. I took the letterhead of something. I took the liberty of speaking with a Dr. Albright, he said softly, as if confessing a sin. He's a specialist. He did a preliminary cognitive assessment. Just a conversation, really. He slid one of the papers toward me. My eyes scanned the professional letterhead. The words jumped out. Exhibits Indicators 4. At risk for financial mismanagement. Further evaluation strongly recommended. My blood ran cold. He'd found a doctor. A real one. He'd been laying this groundwork for weeks, maybe months, feeding this man a narrative of a doddering old woman who couldn't be trusted with her own social security. He thinks it's for the best, Helen, Mark said, his voice now a near whisper. He pushed the other, thicker stack of papers toward me. The title was printed in bold black letters at the top. Durable Power of Attorney. He looked me right in the eye. All the fake sympathy was gone, replaced by a hard, greedy glint. It's time, Helen, for us to help you before you really hurt yourself. Sarah burst into quiet sobs next to him, burying her face in his shoulder. She believed it. Every last damn word of it. My own daughter. I looked at her, then at the papers, then at Amelia, whose face was a mask of thunder. I let out a long, slow sigh. It felt like all the air, all the fight, had just gone out of me. My shoulders slumped. I picked up my teacup, my hand trembling just slightly, a little touch of theater my arthritis was happy to provide. I took a slow, deliberate sip. The warmth of the Earl Grey did nothing to stop the ice in my veins. I placed the cup back on its saucer with a soft clink. I looked at Mark, this whippersnapper who thought he had me cornered, who thought my mind was as old as my body. I looked at his smug, triumphant face. And then I gave him the saddest, most defeated little smile I could muster. "All right, sweetie," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "You win." Amelia's head snapped toward me, her eyes wide with disbelief. Sarah's crying softened into a hiccup of pure relief. Mark's whole body relaxed, the smug satisfaction washing over him. He'd done it. He'd won. Had he? Had I really just folded? After all that planning, all that righteous fury, was I actually handing over the keys to my entire life to the man who was robbing me blind?
Oh, that look on his face. If you could bottle smug, honey, it would have been radiating off him in waves. Mark leaned back in his chair, the picture of a man who just closed the biggest deal of his life.
He actually steepled his fingers like some B-movie villain. He'd done it. He'd broken the old bat. He slid the pen, a fancy Mont Blanc, probably bought with my money, across the polished mahogany of my dining table. It came to a stop right next to the signature line. "Just here, Helen," he said, his voice now oozing a thick, syrupy concern, "and we can put all this unpleasantness behind us." Sarah, my poor, dear, idiotic daughter, was dabbing her eyes with the tissue. She gave me this watery, grateful smile. "Oh, Mama, you're doing the right thing. We'll take such good care of you." I looked at that pen. I looked at the legal document that would turn me from the head of my household into a ward of the state, with this two-bit con man holding the purse strings. Amelia was practically vibrating with fury beside me, looking like she was about to launch herself across the table. I reached out, my hand still doing that little trimmer act for me. "Bless you, arthritis." Mark's eyes followed my hand, his grin widening just a fraction. He thought I was reaching for the pen. Silly boy. My fingers bypassed the pen entirely. Instead, I reached for the little silver rectangle I'd placed beside my teacup earlier, one of those newfangled digital voice recorders. My grandkids got it for me for Christmas, said I could use it to dictate my memoirs or shopping lists. Lord, the thing was a nuisance. The buttons are no bigger than a pinhead, and the manual was written in a language that was only technically English. I'd been complaining about it for weeks. "What's that?" Mark asked, his smile faltering for the first time. I held it up, squinting at the tiny screen. "Oh, this little gadget," I said, my voice changing. The whisper was gone. The defeat was gone. In its place was the crisp, clear tone of Helen Parker, certified public accountant who for 40 years had made grown men sweat during audits. It's been a devil of a time to figure out, but I think I finally got the hang of it. Amelia's head, which had been bowed in defeat, slowly rose. A tiny, dangerous spark lit up in her eyes. "Before I sign my life away, sweetie," I said, looking Mark dead in the eye, "I was thinking we could all listen to a little story. A recording. From your phone call the other day, the one you took in the garden because you thought I was napping?" The color drained from his face. It was magnificent. It was like watching the tide go out, leaving behind pale, clammy sand. Sarah looked from me to him, her brow furrowed in confusion. "What call, Mark? What's she talking about?" He started to bluster. "This is ridiculous. She's confused. She's making things up. Helen, this is exactly what we were talking about." I just gave him a serene little smile. "Is it now?" And with a satisfying click that I'd practiced a dozen times, I pressed the play button. The tinny sound of my son-in-law's voice filled the stunned silence of my living room. It was him, all right, but it wasn't the concerned, loving husband I'd just been listening to. This was a different man, a boastful, cruel man. "Yeah, Dave, it's a done deal," the little silver rectangle chirped. "The old bat is finally cracking. I swear the waterworks from Sarah were the final push. She's completely on board." Sarah made a choked sound, her hand flying to her mouth. "We'll have her sign the durable power of attorney by the end of the week. Once I have that, I get control of the whole portfolio, her IRA, the stocks Robert left her, everything. The house is next." A man's voice, presumably Dave, laughed on the other end. "You're a bastard, Mark." "Hey, she's not using it," my son-in-law's recorded voice said with a chilling lack of shame. "We'll have it all moved to that offshore account through my guy at Wells Fargo by Tuesday. She won't know what hit her. By the time she figures it out, she'll be in a nice quiet home, and we'll be in the Bahamas. She'll thank us for it." The recording ended. A final, triumphant chuckle from Mark echoed for a moment before the recorder clicked into silence. The only sound in the room was the frantic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Tick, tock. Each second felt like a hammer blow. Sarah had pulled away from Mark as if he were on fire. Her face was a mask of utter devastation and horror. She was staring at her husband, the father of her children, as if he were a complete stranger, a monster. Amelia, my glorious, stone-faced lawyer, was now smiling. It was not a nice smile.
It was the smile of a shark that had just scented a whole lot of blood in the water. And Mark? Well, Mark was frozen. His jaw was slack, his eyes wide with pure, unadulterated panic. The smug, victorious man was gone. In his place was a cornered rat, frantically looking for an escape that just wasn't there. I picked up my teacup, took a slow, victorious sip of my now lukewarm Earl Grey, and set it down. I looked at the wreckage of a man sitting across from me. So tell me, how can Mark possibly talk his way out of this?
God, it was delicious. The silence, I mean. Thick and heavy, like a wool blanket on a summer night in Georgia. You could feel the weight of it pressing down. You could almost hear Mark's blood pressure skyrocketing. The only thing louder than that ticking clock was the sound of his entire pathetic little world imploding. He finally found his voice, and what a voice it was! A strangled, reedy little squeak. That's not real, he stammered, his eyes darting between me, Sarah, and my lawyer. It's a fake, a deep fake. You can do anything with computers now. She's an old woman. She's confused. She's trying to break us up. He actually pointed a trembling finger at me, as if I were the villain here. Sarah let out a sound that was half sob, half gasp of disgust. A deep fake, Mark? A deep fake? That was Dave's voice. That was your voice. I'd know your disgusting little chuckle anywhere. My niece Catherine, my late sister's girl, bless her fiery heart, had been sitting quietly in the corner, her face getting tighter and tighter. She stood up so fast, her chair scraped against the hardwood floor. She pulled out her iPhone. That's it. I'm calling the police. Right now. This is elder abuse? Fraud? Conspiracy? Catherine, honey, put the phone down, I said. My voice was calm, quiet. It cut through the rising hysteria like a sharp knife. Everyone looked at me. Even Mark, his face a pasty, sweaty mess. Catherine hesitated. On Helen, he needs to be arrested. This is a crime. Oh, I know it's a crime, sweetie. A whole list of them, in fact. Amelia has them all written down, don't you, dear? Amelia's shark smile widened. She patted her leather briefcase. With statutes and recommended sentencing guidelines, Helen? I gave Mark a little smile of my own. You see, Mark, an arrest is so common, so simple. It's for thugs who snatch purses. What you did, what you tried to do, that requires a more delicate touch, a more thorough accounting, if you will. He started to bluster again. This is insane. You set me up. This is entrapment. Is it now? I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a low, conversational tone. Let me explain something to you, you arrogant little boy. For the last 6 months, you've treated me like a doddering old fool. You talk slowly, use small words, pat my hand while your eyes sized up my jewelry. You thought because I have a little arthritis in my knuckles and I still balance a checkbook that my brain had turned to mush. You thought my generation was simple, easy to fool. I picked up the small silver recorder from the table. You thought technology was your weapon, but you forgot something. My husband, God rest his soul, was an electrical engineer. He loved gadgets. This little beauty, it's voice activated. It's been sitting on the shelf behind that porcelain doll for 2 months, recording every single conversation in this room. Every time you came over for dinner, every time you'd stop by to check on me, it was listening. I have hours, Mark. Hours of you scheming, bragging, and plotting. His face went from white to a sickly shade of green. And the paperwork, I continued, a wave of satisfaction washing over me. All those documents you had me sign, you thought you were so clever slipping things past me? You have no idea the amount of paperwork I've been doing on the side. All those trips to the notary, my lord, what a headache. Especially that dreary quit-claim deed stuff for the house title. Had to get it notarized down at the UPS store. Can you believe it? Stood in line for 20 minutes while my hip was acting up something fierce, but I got it done. I looked him dead in the eye. My smile was gone. You are a parasite, Mark. A leech that attached itself to my daughter and planned to drain my family dry. An arrest would be a mercy. It would give you a narrative. Crazy old mother-in-law framed me. No, you don't get a narrative. You get nothing. I turned my gaze to my daughter, whose face was a mess of tears and dawning cold fury. Sarah, darling, you will take the children and go to your brother's house tonight. Tomorrow, Amelia will file the divorce papers. We will be citing... Well, we have a lot to cite, don't we? We will also be filing for a restraining order and for your sole, uncontested custody of my grandchildren. I looked back at the shell of a man in my armchair. You will leave this house. You will not contact your wife or your children. You will not go to your office at Wells Fargo because a copy of that recording is already on its way to their corporate ethics department. By morning, you will have no wife, no children, no job, and no home. You will have nothing but the clothes on your back and the car that, I believe, is in Sarah's name. I sat back, the leather of my chair sighing softly. The grandfather clock in the hall struck the hour. Bong, bong, bong. Each chime was like a nail in his coffin. So, you'd think that would be the end of it, right? His utter humiliation right there on my Persian rug. Is his humiliation the end of the story? Oh, honey, we were just getting to the good part.
Lord, you would have thought I'd just condemned the man to the gallows. He just sat there, deflated. The air went out of him like a cheap pool float, and his shoulders slumped. For a moment, a glorious, beautiful moment, I saw the panic in his eyes, the wild, cornered animal look of a man who sees the trap not after he's sprung it, but a second before the teeth clamp down on his leg. Sarah's sobs had quieted to these hiccuping gasps, the sound of a storm passing. The only other noise was that blasted grandfather clock, ticking away the seconds of his miserable life. Tick, tock. I was savoring it. I really was. I'd earned it. I leaned back, ready to deliver the final quiet order for him to get the hell out of my house. And then he started to laugh. It wasn't a loud laugh. It was worse. It started deep in his chest, a low, rumbling chuckle that was utterly devoid of humor. It was the sound of a lock clicking into place. His head, which had been bowed in defeat, slowly came up. The panic was gone. In its place was something cold and reptilian, something I hadn't seen before. Pity. He was looking at me with pity. "Oh, Helen," he said, and the chuckle turned into a full, condescending smile. He shook his head slowly, like he was dealing with a child who'd just tried to pass off a crayon drawing as a Rembrandt. "Helen, Helen, Helen, did you really think I was that stupid?" My blood ran cold. Sarah stopped crying altogether. The silence in the room was suddenly heavy, suffocating. He reached into the pocket of his ridiculously tight designer jeans and pulled out his iPhone. The screen glowed to life, illuminating his smug face. With a few flicks of his thumb, he navigated to an app. He held the phone out for us to see. The screen showed a complicated-looking interface with waveforms and menus I didn't recognize. The app was called Voice Synth Pro. "It's a fun party trick, sweetie," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Deep fake audio. Voice synthesis. You feed it a few minutes of someone's voice, say, from all the voicemails I've left you and Sarah over the years, and you can make them say anything you want. I want your retirement, Helen. I'll ruin your daughter. Anything." He tapped another icon on his screen and his call log appeared. "See this?"
He angled the phone so I could see the bright green bar. "This call from 2:30 this afternoon, the one that lasted 17 minutes?" He tapped it. The contact name was Mom. I was on the phone with my mother in Sarasota. We were talking about her arthritis. She'll testify to it. My cell records, the real ones from Verizon, not some cooked-up recording, will prove it. My mind was reeling. It felt like the floor had just dropped away, leaving me suspended over a black, empty space. All my carefully laid plans, my beautiful, intricate trap, it was all based on that one recording, that one piece of irrefutable proof. And he was telling me it was fake, a fabrication, a party trick. I stared at the phone in his hand. I remembered the call so clearly, his voice laced with that disgusting, greedy impatience. I even remember thinking it was odd because halfway through his little monologue, a car alarm started blaring outside his office window. One of those really obnoxious ones, a Toyota, you know the kind. It went on for a good 30 seconds before shutting off. I'd almost mentioned it, but I didn't want to interrupt his confession. A random, real-world sound. How could an app fake that? But looking at his face, at that calm, superior smirk, doubt began to creep in. This whippersnapper generation, they grew up with this technology. It's like breathing to them. What did I know? I still struggle with the remote control for the television. He saw the uncertainty on my face and pressed his advantage. "Honestly, Helen, to think you could pull one over on me. To record me? To what? Try to blackmail me?" He let out another one of those dead-sounding chuckles. "You know, fabricating evidence is a felony, a serious one. Sending a doctored recording to my employer with the intent to harm my career? That's libel, slander. You, my dear clever mother-in-law, have just walked into a world of trouble." He stood up, tucking the phone back into his pocket. He was in command again. The pathetic, broken man from 5 minutes ago was gone, replaced by this monster in a polo shirt. I looked over at Sarah. Her face, which had been hardening with righteous fury, had crumbled. The hope had drained out of her, leaving behind a gray, exhausted despair. She looked from his smug face to my stunned one, and I could see the question in her eyes, the same one that was screaming in my own head. For the first time in 30 years, since my Robert passed, I felt utterly and completely outmaneuvered. I had staked everything on that recording, and this snake oil salesman was telling me it was worthless, worse than worthless. It was a weapon he could now use against me. He walked to the door, his posture perfect, his steps consonant. He paused with his hand on the brass knob and looked back at us. "You have a good night, Helen. Sarah, honey, I'll see you at home. We have a lot to talk about." He left. The front door clicked shut behind him, and the sound echoed the finality of a judge's gavel. We just sat there. The grandfather clock kept ticking. Bong, bong, bong. Only this time, I had the sickening feeling that the nails weren't for his coffin, they were for mine. For the first time in my life, I had no answer. I looked at that snake, and all I could think was, my God, was he telling the truth? Could a piece of software on a telephone really undo everything?
Bullshit. That's the first word that formed in my head. Pure, unadulterated bullshit. A piece of software on his little iPhone? I've seen this boy try to balance a checkbook. He couldn't find his own backside with a map and a flashlight. The idea that he was some kind of tech wizard who could magically erase a recording was laughable. But I wasn't laughing, because I saw the look on his face and I saw the look on Sarah's. He didn't have to be a wizard. He just had to be convincing. And Lord, that man could sell ice to an Eskimo. He saw the flicker of doubt in my eyes, and he pounced on it, like a predator that's just wounded its prey and is moving in for the kill.
He took a step back from the door, his face a mask of deep theatrical concern. "In fact," he said, his voice dropping to that syrupy, patronizing tone he uses when he's about to deliver a killing blow, he reached into the inner pocket of his blazer, the one Sarah bought him for their anniversary, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. A letter. He didn't even have to open it. He just held it, tapping it gently against the palm of his other hand. "This little stunt of yours, Helen, this secret recording," he shook his head, a sad little smile playing on his lips. He looked directly at Sarah, who was watching him, mesmerized. "Honey, this is exactly what Dr. Evans was worried about." Dr. Evans, the new geriatric specialist they'd insisted I see a few months back. A young buck, not 35 years old, who'd asked me if I knew what year it was, and then spent 20 minutes talking into his little digital recorder. I thought it was just a checkup, a way to appease their nagging. My God, I was a fool. "This recording," Mark continued, his voice dripping with false pity, "combined with your recent behavior, your accusations, it only proves the doctor's concerns, the paranoia, the confusion. You're fabricating evidence, Helen, to support your delusions. You see?" He unfolded the letter just enough for us to see the letterhead, Mercy Hospital. The air left my lungs in a single, silent gasp. It felt like he'd reached into my chest and squeezed my heart. I'd spent 45 years as an accountant for a major firm downtown. My mind was my living. It was my fortress. My numbers never lied. My ledgers were perfect. I could still calculate compound interest in my head faster than these kids could find the calculator app on their phones. My mind was the one thing I had left that was completely, unequivocally mine. And he was taking it. He was using my own cleverness, my own perfectly laid trap as the proof that I'd lost it. I looked at Sarah, my sweet girl. Her face was a wreck of confusion. The righteous anger she'd felt on my behalf just 10 minutes ago had curdled into a terrible, fearful doubt. She looked at the letter in Mark's hand, then at my face, then back again. He wasn't just talking to me anymore. He was performing for an audience of one. Her. He was methodically, brilliantly turning my own daughter against me, not with anger, but with concern. It was the most evil thing I had ever witnessed. "She needs help, Sarah," Mark said softly, stepping toward her and placing a gentle hand on her arm. "She's not well. This isn't your mother talking, it's the illness." I wanted to scream. I wanted to fly across the room and claw that smug, pitying look right off his face. I wanted to grab my old, heavy ledger from the desk, the one where I've documented every single dollar this parasite has siphoned from us for the last 5 years, and beat him with it. But I couldn't move. My arthritis suddenly felt like hot lead in my joints. I was frozen. Because what could I say? If I screamed, I was hysterical. If I argued, I was paranoid. If I presented my own evidence, my meticulously kept financial records, they would just be more fabrications. He hadn't just won the argument, he had invalidated my ability to even participate in it. He had checked me into a prison with no bars, a cell made of my daughter's love and concern, and he had just thrown away the key. He had turned my greatest weapon, the truth, into a symptom of my own disease. My mind was racing, trying to find a move, a counter-move, anything, but every door I tried was locked. He hadn't just disarmed my trap, he had rebuilt it around me, using my own design. How can you ever prove the truth when your own trap is now the evidence against you?
Damn, this courtroom reeked of stale coffee and defeat. You know the smell, sweeties, the one that clings to the air in places where hope goes to die. It's a bureaucratic kind of stink, a blend of cheap carpet cleaner and crushed dreams. I sat there, ramrod straight as my arthritis allowed, listening to Mark's lawyer drone on about my deteriorating mental state and my supposed inability to manage my own affairs. He was a young buck, maybe 30,
with a haircut that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check. He spoke with that practiced sincerity that only comes from years of billing by the hour. The judge, a woman with a face as lined and unforgiving as a dried-up creek bed, listened intently, occasionally nodding or scribbling on a yellow legal pad. Sarah sat beside Mark, her eyes fixed on the floor, her shoulders slumped. My Sarah. My bright, fierce, loving Sarah, now a shadow of herself, convinced she was doing what was best for her poor, addled mother. It was a goddamn slow-motion train wreck, and I was strapped to the tracks. The evidence, such as it was damning. The doctor's report, conveniently obtained by Mark, painted a picture of a confused, paranoid old woman prone to irrational outbursts and grandiose delusions. The recording I'd made of Mark practically confessing his scheme? Deemed inadmissible due to questionable provenance and potential tampering. Of course, the phantom factor, that infernal little voice recorder I used to dictate recipes when my hands ached too much to write, was suddenly a sophisticated piece of espionage equipment. Mark, bless his manipulative heart, had presented a carefully curated version of reality. He'd cherry-picked my moments of frustration, twisted my words, and presented it all as proof of my declining faculties. Mrs. Parker, the lawyer said, his voice dripping with false sympathy, isn't it true that you've made repeated accusations against Mr. Caldwell, claiming he is trying to steal your money? He is stealing my money, I snapped before I could stop myself. Sarah flinched. Mark reached over and squeezed her hand, his face a mask of concern. The lawyer smirked, just a tiny flicker at the corner of his mouth. And isn't it also true, Mrs. Parker, that you believe Mr. Caldwell is controlling your daughter's mind? He's manipulating her, yes, he's turned her against me, I retorted. Mom, please, Sarah whispered, her voice thick with tears. The lawyer turned to the judge, spreading his hands in a gesture of mock helplessness. As you can see, Your Honor, Mrs. Parker's delusions are quite pronounced. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them all the truth, to lay bare Mark's lies and manipulations. But I knew it was useless. Every word I spoke, every protest I made only served to reinforce their narrative. I was trapped. The judge cleared her throat. Mrs. Parker, are you aware of the implications of this conservatorship? If granted, Mr. Caldwell will have complete control over your finances and your medical care. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat feeling like a golf ball. Yes, Your Honor, I understand. And do you have any objections? My mind was a blank. I looked at Sarah, her face etched with worry. I looked at Mark, his eyes gleaming with triumph. I looked at the judge, her expression impassive. What could I say? What could I possibly say that would make any difference? No, I said quietly. No, Your Honor, I have no objections. The lawyer smiled, a genuine, triumphant smile this time. Mark's grip on Sarah's hand tightened. The judge nodded and began to recite the legal jargon that would strip me of my autonomy, my dignity, my very self. The room seemed to shrink, the air growing thick and suffocating. My chest felt tight, as if an invisible hand was squeezing the life out of me. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the sound of the lawyer's voice, the sight of Mark's smug face, the weight of Sarah's misguided concern. When I opened my eyes again, I focused on a small detail, a tiny, almost imperceptible crack in the wood paneling behind the judge's bench. It snaked its way from the top of the paneling to the bottom, a silent fissure in the veneer of order and justice. It was so small, so insignificant that no one else seemed to notice it. But I did. And in that tiny crack, in that small imperfection, I saw a glimmer of hope,
a tiny, fragile, almost impossible hope. Because if that crack was there, if that small imperfection existed in this seemingly impenetrable facade, then maybe, just maybe, there was another piece of reality left that they hadn't managed to control. Maybe there was a flaw in their plan, a weakness in their armor. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a way out. But what could it be?
Lord, give me strength. The judge called a 15-minute recess. Just like that. She rapped her gavel, a sound no louder than a woodpecker on a dead tree, and my life was put on pause. The lawyer, that snake oil salesman in a $1,000 suit, gave Mark a congratulatory pat on the shoulder. Mark, my own flesh and blood, let out a long, slow breath, the kind a man does when he's just dodged a bullet, or, in his case, successfully cornered his prey. Sarah, my sweet, misguided Sarah, just looked at me with those big, sad eyes, brimming with a pity that felt more like acid than comfort. She thought she was saving me. Bless her heart. They got up to get coffee. No one asked me if I wanted any. I was already a ghost in my own life. A piece of furniture they were deciding which room to put in. I just sat there, at that polished table that smelled faintly of lemon wax and desperation, my hands folded in my lap. My knuckles were white. I could feel the arthritis flaring up, a dull, angry throb that matched the one in my chest. For something to do, I picked up the iPad Mark had bought me for my birthday last year. "To make your life easier, Mom," he'd said, "you can video chat with the grandkids, order your groceries." What he meant was, so I can keep an eye on you. I hated the damn thing. It was always chiming and beeping with notifications. But right then, I just needed to look at something other than the four walls of that courtroom. I swiped the screen on, my finger clumsy on the cool glass. My usual apps were there, the news, my email, a solitaire game I played when the nights got too long. And then I saw it. That stupid, obnoxious icon for the smart home security system he'd had installed. A little blue house with a Wi-Fi signal coming out of the chimney. He said it was for my safety. It connected to the thermostat, the door locks, the lights. Honey, it was for his peace of mind, not mine. The thing sent an alert to his phone for every little thing. Front door unlocked, living room lamp on. Helen's iPhone has left the 2-mile geofence. It was a digital leash, and I was sick of it. Right then and there, a wave of pure, unadulterated fury washed over me. Screw this. Screw him. I was gonna delete the damn thing. I pressed my finger down on the little blue house until all the icons started to jiggle, a little X appearing in the corner of each one. My thumb, shaking with a rage I hadn't felt in years, moved toward that X. I was one tap away from exercising the tiniest bit of control I had left. But my finger froze, hovering right over the screen. Because, in my haste, a notification banner had popped up at the top of the screen. I'd seen 1,000 of them. System log updated, 8:42 a.m. Usually I just swiped him away. Useless, boring information. But this time, I didn't. I just stared at it. Log. That one word. It was like a key turning in a lock that had been rusted shut for decades. The part of my brain that had spent 40 years as a forensic accountant, the part that lived for ledgers and audit trails and finding the one misplaced decimal point that could unravel an entire company, it woke up. It roared to life like a furnace. My thumb moved, not to delete. I tapped the banner. A screen opened. It was just a long, scrolling list of text. Utterly boring to anyone else, but to me, honey, it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. 7:15 a.m. iPhone Mark P connected to home Wi-Fi. 7:18 a.m. Thermostat temperature lowered to 68 degrees F. 8:02 a.m. Front door unlocked. Manual key. 9:31 a.m. iPhone Mark P disconnected from home Wi-Fi. 9:31 a.m. iPhone Mark P location detected I-85 southbound. 10:47 a.m. iPhone Mark P connected to courthouse_guest.wi-fi. It went on and on. Every light switched on, every time the door opened, every single time his phone or my phone or Sarah's phone connected or disconnected from my home network. It was a perfect, impartial, time-stamped record, a digital witness that couldn't be bribed or intimidated or gaslit. It didn't care about his sob stories or his faked concern. It only recorded the cold, hard data, the facts. My heart started hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terrifying, brilliant hope. The crack in the wall. This was it. This was my crack in their perfect facade. Sarah came back then, holding a styrofoam cup. "Aunt Helen, I brought you some tea." I didn't even look at the cup. I grabbed her wrist, my grip surprisingly strong. My whole body was electric. She looked startled, her eyes wide. "Sarah," I whispered, my voice raspy, urgent. I leaned in close so no one else could hear. "This app, the security app, it saves everything to the cloud, right? Not just on the device?" She blinked, confused. Yeah, I think so. Mark set it up. It all goes to a server somewhere." "Why?" I looked her dead in the eye, and for the first time in months, she wasn't looking at a frail old woman. She was looking at the accountant who had once made a slick executive from Wells Fargo cry. "I need the server logs," I said, my voice low and fierce. "All of them, from the day he installed it. Get the cloud data. Get it now." Sarah just stared at me, her mouth slightly open. She was looking at a list of when I turned my lights on, at a log of when my thermostat kicked in. She couldn't see what I saw. Not yet. What on earth could I possibly want with those boring security logs?
Lord, give me strength. I could still smell the stale coffee and cheap cologne clinging to the air in that courtroom. Felt like a damn bus station, not a place where justice was supposed to be served. Sarah, bless her heart, moved faster than I thought possible. She vanished, a blur of righteous anger disguised as concern, and reappeared a few hours later looking like she'd rustled a bear. "Aunt Helen," she said, breathlessly, handing me a sealed manila envelope. "I got it. Emergency subpoena. Judge was persuaded." She didn't elaborate. Some things are better left unsaid, especially when family secrets are involved. Inside was a thumb drive. The security system's cloud data. Every beep, every chime, every geo-fencing record, every blessed digital fart those cameras and sensors had captured for the last 6 months. I handed it to my lawyer, a young woman named Deborah, who looked like she still belonged in law school, but had a pit bull's tenacity. Deborah plugged it into her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She called up our forensic accountant, a wiry little man named Mr. Chen, with a comb-over that defied gravity. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, but his eyes were sharp as tacks. "Mrs. Parker?" he said, his voice surprisingly loud in the hushed courtroom. "The data is illuminating." He began to walk us through it, slowly, deliberately, like he was teaching a kindergarten class. First, the geofencing logs. That was the boring part, really. The system tracked when my car left the driveway, when I came back. It knew if I walked to the mailbox or just sat on the porch swing. It was the phantom factor, that system. But Mr. Chen wasn't interested in my social life. He was interested in Mark's. He pulled up a specific date, the day Mark convinced me to sign those documents, the day he'd been on the phone supposedly in Savannah comforting a dying client. According to Mr. Davies' testimony, Mr. Chen said, his voice dripping with polite skepticism, he was approximately 250 miles away from Atlanta at 2 p.m. on July 17th. Is that correct? Mark, looking smug in his expensive suit, nodded. "Absolutely. I have witnesses, travel records." Mr. Chen smiled, a thin, bloodless smile. "Perhaps, but the geofencing data tells a different story. It places Mr. Davies' phone, and therefore presumably Mr. Davies himself, at Mrs. Parker's residence at precisely 2:07 p.m. on July 17th, for a duration of approximately 43 minutes. The courtroom gasped. Mark's face went white. That's impossible," he stammered. "There must be some mistake." "Indeed," Mr. Chen said dryly, "a mistake of approximately 250 miles. But the real beauty, Mr. Davies, lies in the cross-referencing." He switched to another screen, displaying a complex network of data points. IP addresses, MAC addresses, router logs, banking transactions. It looked like a plate of spaghetti, but Mr. Chen started unraveling it strand by strand. "This," he said, pointing to a specific entry, "is the MAC address of Mr. Davies' personal laptop. We know this because it was registered on his home network. Now observe this entry. At 2:15 p.m. on July 17th, this device connected to Mrs. Parker's Wi-Fi network. And," he added, his voice rising slightly, "initiated 3 separate transfers of $50,000 each to a cryptocurrency exchange. Transfers that, I might add, were flagged as suspicious and immediately frozen by the bank." The courtroom's silent, save for the rhythmic tapping of Mr. Chen's fingers on the keyboard. He'd laid it all out, plain as day. Mark hadn't just installed a security system, he'd installed a perfect, unimpeachable digital witness to his own crimes. I watched Mark's face crumble. The confidence, the arrogance, the carefully constructed facade all gone, replaced by a raw, naked fear. He thought he was so clever, using technology to manipulate an old woman on a fixed income. He thought he was playing chess. But I was playing poker, honey, and I had the royal flush. But as I watched Mark being led away, a chilling thought crept into my mind. I had built a trap, a perfect, inescapable cage for Mark. But what happens when the trap you set for someone else becomes your own cage?
Lord, the silence in that room. It was heavier than a wet wool blanket. You could have heard a pin drop on cotton. Mark stood there, frozen, his face the color of old oatmeal. The digital trail Mr. Chen had laid out wasn't just evidence, it was a signed confession, a notarized affidavit of his own damn foolishness. The judge, a woman named Eleanor Vance, who looked like she'd been chewing on nails for breakfast since the Carter administration, peered down over her spectacles. She didn't look at Mark, she looked at his lawyer, a young buck who was shuffling his papers as if the answer might magically appear between the lines of a motion to dismiss. "Mr. Davies," Judge Vance said, her voice cutting through the quiet like a chilled knife, "your petition for conservatorship over your mother-in-law, Mrs. Parker, is not only denied, it is dismissed with extreme prejudice." Extreme prejudice. Honey, in legal terms, that's the equivalent of being told not to let the door hit you on the way out and then having the door slammed on your backside for good measure. Furthermore, she continued, her eyes finally flicking over to Mark, a single devastating glance. This court is referring the complete digital forensics report, along with the transcript of these proceedings, to the district attorney's office for immediate review and consideration of criminal charges. She banged the gavel once. It wasn't loud, but it sounded like a cannon shot. This hearing is adjourned. And that was it. 2 bailiffs who had been standing by the wall looking bored suddenly moved with purpose. They walked over to Mark. One of them said his name, low and official. I didn't watch them put the cuffs on. I didn't need to. I just looked at my daughter, Caroline. Her face was a mess of tears, not for her husband, but for her own misplaced trust, for the years she'd spent defending a snake. I went over and just held her hand. The cage I'd worried about wasn't mine. It was the one Mark had built for himself, bar by digital bar. I had simply held up a mirror so he could see it. Stepping out of that courthouse was like taking my first breath after being underwater for a year. The Atlanta sun was bright, and the air, thick with humidity, had never felt so sweet. The stale, recycled air of the courtroom was gone, and with it, the weight of Mark's accusations. I was just Helen Parker again, 72, a little arthritis in my left knee, but free and in control of my own damn life. A young woman with a microphone and a cameraman in tow scurried over. Mrs. Parker, can we get a comment? Your son-in-law tried to have you declared incompetent." I stopped. I looked right into that camera, thinking of all the other women and men sitting in their living rooms, being told they're too old, too slow, too forgetful. I gave her a small, tight smile. "He thought he was smarter than an old accountant on a fixed income," I said, my voice clear and steady. "He forgot the first rule of our profession." The reporter leaned in. "We always check the receipts." My niece, Amelia, who had driven down from Chattanooga to be there, laughed out loud. She threw her arm around my shoulders as we walked away, leaving the reporter scribbling furiously. "Aunt Helen," she said, her eyes sparkling with an idea, "you know, there are a lot of Marks in the world, and a lot of people like you who just need someone to help them check the receipts." We stopped by a little cafe on the corner, the kind with wobbly tables and good strong coffee. I ordered my Earl Grey, hot, no sugar. I watched the steam curl up from the cup, a perfect little ghost, and I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't since my robber passed. "What are you suggesting, sweetie?" I asked, though I already knew. "I'm suggesting a new venture," Amelia said, leaning forward. "You've got the brains, the experience. I can handle the tech, the marketing. We could be consultants. We could help people, our people, fight back against these predators." I took a long, slow sip of my tea. The bergamot was fragrant, calming. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't look like a slow decline into obscurity. It looked like a ledger waiting for a new entry, a fresh start. I set my cup down and looked at my brilliant niece. "All right," I said, a real smile spreading across my face. "Let's do it. We'll call it the Earl Grey Audit." Amelia grinned, pulling out her iPhone to start brainstorming. And as I sat there basking in the sunlight streaming through the window, I had only one question: who will be our first client?